You're listening to the SweetLife Entrepreneur Podcast. Simplified strategies to grow your service business and launch a life you love faster. With business mentor and entrepreneur activator, April Beach.
So let's do that. And then is there any sort of opt-in that I can share for you to help?
Yeah, I have a free legal checklist at rachelbrenke.com that they can hop into, and then the follow-ups of those emails will just be expanding some of those topics.
Cool. We'll make sure that's included.
And I think the big thing with that checklist, even if they've done like the business formation stuff, it's kind of meant for them to pull it out yearly and run through it in case things have changed.
Cool. Awesome. Okay, so I'll come back and I'll record your whole intro and everything after I figure out what we talk about, and I can give kind of a pre-rundown of the show. So let's go ahead and dive right in. Okay, you guys, thanks so much for joining us. Welcome to the SweetLife Entrepreneur Podcast, Rachel Brenke. We're so glad that you're here, and I'm especially glad that you're here because we get all these legal questions all the time, and it's completely outside of our scope. My father was an attorney, so there's this part of me that knows a little bit of the lingo. Definitely nowhere near enough to even consult myself, obviously. And it's such an important part of business development that I think that entrepreneurs are missing. And so today on the show, we're going to dive into you walking us through the steps to protect our intellectual property. And that is, whether it's a course or, any other creative, original works that people are putting out there, especially online. So I'm so excited to dive into that. But I have to say, because I'm also a personal geek, not just a business geek, I am really looking forward to hearing your story. Because when I read your bio, you're a mother of 5, you're an attorney, you have your MBA, but you're also a U.S. athlete, Olympic athlete. So let me just let you take it over. Welcome to the show. Thanks so much for being on here, and just tell us about you.
Yeah, so I love that you say you're excited, because normally when you tell people you're an attorney, like their eyes glaze over and they're like, oh my gosh, the attorney's here. Because there's so many bad jokes. We get a bad rap about everything. But I think what makes me different than most other attorneys is, I'm doing it. I am in the trenches with you guys. I'm not just an attorney. I own multiple businesses. I love startups. I love creating new brands and new businesses. So everything that I'm going to share today, and you'll see it through a lot of my story, is that all my recommendations and advisements are not through the lens of just being a lawyer. It's from the lens of being a mom of 5, of training at high intensity and volumes. And when I sit down to work, I need to work. I need to have the best protection. Like, I don't have time to screw around. And that's really where, just like the culmination of my entire perspective and the foundation of my recommendations for you guys. I don't really know what else to share about myself. I guess in my story, I can add on, I'm an 11-year cancer survivor. My cancer was discovered when I was pregnant with my first child, and we were told we'd have no more kids. So we tried all of this. My husband was in and out deployments to Iraq, and I was building my businesses. That's really when all this really started. I had told myself, if I overcome this cancer, I want to be as involved with my son as much as possible. And no idea there'd be 4 more later. I wanted to be as present and involved with him as I could, but I also didn't want to work for somebody else's dream and pad someone else's pocket. So the cancer really was like the marker of where everything took off. And like I said, we were told we weren't going to have any more kids. So I said, I'm doing this. I'm consulting other businesses. I'm running businesses. I'm going to try law school. I paid the deposit. We sold all the baby stuff, and we found out we were pregnant with number 2 a week later. And then I just went and had babies during law school, and I don't recommend it.
You're so rad. Okay, so you went to law school while having babies. You have 5 kids right now. How old are your kids?
The oldest is 13 and the youngest is 3.
Wow.
So yeah, it's hands full but heart full. So it's definitely it's interesting, because I don't think I'd be as successful in athletics or in business if I didn't have them. Because when I wasn't forced into a structure, when I wasn't forced into being efficient, I was really kind of lazy. So it's funny that I'm at where I'm at, and people think that it's a bad thing or a hindrance to have a lot going on. For me, it just makes me thrive.
Yeah, I get that. I think that I'm exactly like that as well. When I have less time, I focus so much more and I get so much more done. And, I tend to find that I'm taking care of my personal self when the kids are back in school, when I'm on this routine, instead of when we're really like lackadaisical in the summer and traveling and it's everything just kind of goes out with the wind. So tell us about, I'm very curious about your athletic training too. Tell us about your sport.
So I do triathlons. I'm actually at the height of training right now. I'm going to the Ironman World Championships in 4 weeks. Oh, that makes my heart pound because I have so much to get done. But I train 6 days a week. And so if those that don't know Ironman triathlons, it's 140.6 miles. And so my long workouts can be up to 6 or 7 hours at a time. I only do about 2 of those a week. The rest of it's about 2 or 3, maybe 4 hours a day of training. And training can also include all the other things that needs to go on with like physical therapy and just other health stuff rather than actual training. I'm very fortunate that I get to do it because I have a flexible job, which kind of brings us full circle to why I started entrepreneurship. I wasn't athletic first and then decided to do entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship allowed me to do the things that have piqued my interest as I've gotten older.
That's great. I love that. Perfect example of what I consider lifestyle entrepreneurship. It's just perfect. So we're totally going to be cheering you on, and this podcast is probably going to air right around the time that you're doing that Ironman. So you guys make sure that you're following Rachel on Instagram. I'm sure that you'll be posting on Instagram, and we'll put all the links to that in the show notes for this episode. So let's go ahead and dive into today's business training. We have a lot of entrepreneurs that listen to this show. A lot of them are really, really good at what they do. Really good at creating original content and creating courses and writing content. And they're putting out so much content. Everything we're saying is create original content, create it. But then how do they protect it? So help us understand the steps to protect our intellectual property.
So, and I love that you keep using the phrase intellectual property, because when I use that as a lawyer, that's normal lingo for me. Majority of entrepreneurs kind of just look at me and like the whole dog head tilt. They kind of go, what are you talking about? I don't have that. And my response is, do you have a business name? You have intellectual property. And intellectual property, like you mentioned earlier, it can be a business name. It can be your slogan. It can be your logo. It's the content on your blog. It's the videos you're creating in courses. It's the social media updates that you're putting out there, the images you're taking. The most commonly understood of intellectual properties are copyrights and trademarks, but the property itself, those are the legal protections. The property itself is the list I just gave you guys. And it's funny to me because I work with many successful entrepreneurs who've been doing this 10, 20, 30 years. They haven't had a problem. Then all of a sudden they get smacked with a trademark cease and desist or a copyright infringement suit. And they're like, but I've been over here in my lane doing my thing for 30 years. And all of a sudden this happens. And it's true. You can be really good at what you do, but that's why you need to have someone like me to help protect that and keep you from inadvertently infringing upon someone else. And I'll give you an example here in a minute. But one of my favorite phrases is, you never have an issue till you have an issue. And it's so true when it comes to legal stuff. You could be in business for 50 years and never have a problem, but the longer you're in business, the more likely it's going to happen. And we're in this day and age where you come out with a new course name, you come out with a new book or a podcast or anything, it's on the web like that. Google is crawling it, Google alerts are pulling it, SEO is happening, social media platforms are instantaneous. You can be found to be infringing like that. You can also find other people infringing just like that. So the sword being, falls two ways here. I don't want to share these stories of getting slapped with federal lawsuits, but it is something you guys need to stop and think about. it's funny, is on my own podcast, I was interviewing somebody. He had this huge launch coming out of this new course, and he had done all the branding. He had spent a lot of money. He had done a blitz of podcast recordings that were supposed to air the week of the launch. So during that time, what was the part of that marketing? He was sharing the name of the course, Common Sense, right? Over and over. I was one of the last podcasts before, like the day before he launched. And I said, hold on, let's pause recording real quick, because I didn't want this to be on air. And I went and checked. He was using a name, and this is a very smart business person, and many of you would know. He was using the name of an already existing federally registered trademark. Luckily, he hadn't put it into commerce, because what would have happened? The second he put it out there, and he was making money, he could have had to disgorge those profits to the person that had the federal registration. He could have had to pay their attorney's fees, his own attorney's fees, plus he was going to have to pay for rebrand and anything, which he had to do anyways. But it just, when he kept saying this course name, I was like, this is really familiar to me. Let me check something. In 15 seconds, that he could have easily done. Went to USPTO, the United States Patent and Trademark Office, and searched the name, and it was the exact same classification of services of the course. It was the exact same offerings that these people had registered it under. And that really made me pause to think, this person is such a huge name in a dominating industry, and he was that close to federal infringement, trademark infringement.
Right. And so let's pause there for a sec. And I think that maybe this is why. So even when you were like, oh gosh, most people don't know what intellectual property means. And I think maybe clearly my legal knowledge is like a drop in the bucket, obviously towards yours. But I think that maybe like that's a common sense to me as well, to check USPTO. And now that you're saying this, I realize that you're saying this, people don't do that. So can you just give us like a brief explanation of where to go to check USPTO, search the word mark, search the image mark. Can you just go over that little tangent briefly so people know?
Yeah, before I dig into that, let me do separate out copyright and trademark though for you guys real quick. Copyright is protecting the actual work. So it's going to protect the actual logo that's created, the actual image and the words on the page. Trademarks protect the source. It's a source indicator. So let's take like Nike, for example. When you see the swoosh on those shoes or on those athletic pants, you know that it's coming, hopefully, from Nike. And the goal, and I always think of it like a string. You're tying a string around the Nike swoosh to the Nike company. All right, when I see the swoosh, I know it's Nike. And so people often confuse the two intellectual properties. Copyright's the actual work. Trademark is connecting that work to a specific business such as Nike, all right? And so that being said, it's hard to search for copyrights. I mean, you can do the usual of Googling and all of that. Trademarks is really where I can give you a really tangible way to keep yourself from infringing. I set up Google Alerts, and I recommend this before you ever put out a business name, before you ever put out a course name, an ebook name, a new product, or even if you're just going to throw up a fun, quippy quote onto social media. I stick it into Google Alerts for a couple of months and let Google do the work for me. Don't just stop there. Google Alerts not enough, but it's a free and easy thing that you can do. The next thing is, let's say you're looking to create a business name. Let's just use that as our example here. Where is one of the first places that people go to search a business name? Social media, because they want the social media handle. That should be your next step. Check social medias to see if there's any existing same or substantially similar business names offering the same thing as what you're going to be doing, okay? So that was Google Alerts, checking social media. You can Google and Google Alerts. The thing that's hard with that is not everyone's SEO is good. Yeah. Some people just have really crappy SEO. Search it if you can. And then also the USPTO. And now these aren't in priority order. All of these are free things that you guys can do. You can take it a step further and have trademark searches done for you. There's search companies, law firms do it. But I always tell my clients, even if they come to me to do the search, I say, have you gone through those 4 things? Because you don't want to pay me to do those 4 things because they're free and you have fingers, you can type.
Right. Cool.
You know. So I think the biggest thing for me, though, is before you guys even try to get a logo created, before you even register your business, check and make sure. Now, one of the myths that I always hear is, well, I got my business name registered in my state, so I'm good to go. The state registration system has absolutely nothing to do with the federal trademark system. They don't talk to each other. All that state system is doing is checking within that state to see if anybody else has the same or similar name. It has absolutely nothing to do with even state trademarks or federal trademarks. So you have to take these next steps to do these searches. To bring this all into a little bit of fear for you guys, what is the potential danger if you don't take these steps? Like this friend of mine, he had put the course out there. When it was out there being sold, the person that held that federal registration of that trademark could have forced my friend to disgorge all their profits, to pay their attorney's fees, and have to deal with federal litigation, which can be $50,000 to $75,000 for just your own attorney's fees. So that's like bottom line of what you may have to end up paying. And when you're the defendant, you don't get a choice whether or not you're going to go with it. You're forced into court at that point.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, what a nightmare. That makes me want to vomit, actually, thinking about that.
I'm glad, and I hope it does, because let's go back and let's make this a little happier. I just gave you guys 4 easy steps to make sure that you're not going to do that. Is that Google search not worth $75,000 to you?
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Well
okay. So let's repeat those for our listeners really quick. Do the Google search alert. So Google keyword alerts. You guys can create those in Google. Second step is checking social media. Third step is actually Googling the business itself. And fourth step is just going to uspto.gov and checking. You can actually search word marks and trademarks there. It's a simple, basic search you guys can conduct. If I can do this, believe me, anybody can do this. It is as easy as Rachel says. So let's kind of move in a little bit, if we can, now to copyright protection.
Yes.
I really want to know what you have to say about protecting the content, original content in courses or in services or programs, or even like you were saying on social media. How does one go about doing that?
So all the trademark stuff we just talked about, again, is the source indicator. It's not actually protecting the work. We're going to shift into actually protection of the work. Your logo, your images, music, your blog posts, your books, all of those sorts of things. Now, in the United States, unlike trademarks, with copyright, you have copyright protections when you tangibly create that work. So let's just say an image, because many of you are probably taking photographs for your Instagram, your website, you're using it on social media. Let's just use an image as an example here. And I also, after we go through and talk about the protections, I want to talk about something that many entrepreneurs don't consider. They may have images that they're using on their social media that they think are theirs, or logos, but they're not. So I want to talk about it here in a second. So United States, when you create, let's say, that image, you're the author of it, you own the rights to that image. You get to control how it's distributed, how it's reproduced, if it's altered. It's this whole bundle of rights. Now, you can have default protections under the law. My recommendation, because it is so cheap and it is so easy to actually take the steps to register your images or your copyright or whatever the works it is that you're doing. Especially if you guys are like selling courses or the things like that. You've created original content, the transcripts, the videos. You can protect that by copyright. What this does for you by actually registering. Well, hold on. If you don't register and you find someone who's using your image or using your course and reselling it without your permission, the only damages, the only recourse that you have at that point is to get actual damages. What do I mean by that? Let's say that you have a course and someone signs up and takes it as your student. They turn around and download it all and they're trying to sell it for themselves. Okay, you want to file or try to go against them because you want to recoup some compensation, file against infringement. But let's say that this infringer actually hasn't sold a single seat to their course. Your actual damages at that point are really small, and you don't get attorney's fees. Whereas if you take the steps to register with the copyright.gov, copyright.gov, it's like $50, $60. It's cheaper than what you'd spend for a 2-steak dinner at Outback. you would get potential statutory statutory damages, which is the amount, like for images, is up to $150,000 per image infringed, plus attorney's fees. Okay, so unregistered, just by mere creation of said image or said course, you have to prove that, you would only receive what the actual damages are. If you take this $60 investment and register it, you're looking at up to $150,000 per work plus attorney's fees. And that's a lot better pill to swallow when you need to file or pursue. You don't always have to file. If you find someone with your work, you don't always have to file. You can reach out to them, do a cease and desist, a demand letter, but just keep in mind, if you get into court, you have a better chance if it's a registered image or registered work or registered intellectual property than if it's not. And little twist on this, even to be able to file in federal court, you have to register it anyways. So you might as well register it before the infringement occurs so you can get the $150,000 per work plus attorney's fees. So you're going to have to do it at some point anyways.
Right. Okay. There are so many important things that you said here. And you guys, listen, we're going to make sure all of the show notes are in here from the show, and you guys have the links to connect with Rachel. But so important. I mean, I just can't even stress this enough, and I'm just echoing what you're already saying. So moving along a little bit further, now let's talk about, let's use a course as an example. Somebody's creating a course. When they're creating courses still, and I know you want to talk about this, so it's kind of a segue in here to this, take it away, girl. They're grabbing these Unsplash and Pexel images, but then they're actually selling the images as part of a course. And I think that what people don't know is there's a different license. You can't just grab those for free. If you want to use them as part of a course, you have to grab a different license for those images, if you use them. Now, that's not marketing the course, correct? It's the actual course itself. So talk to us about images, because images are being swiped like everywhere.
Yeah, so it's interesting. In my law practice, the majority of people that I represent are photographers because it's so easy. And I get the impulse, guys. I get it. And I'm even a photographer myself. But sometimes you're just like, I could really use an image to post today. I'm just going to go screen cap one. Resist the urge, because is it worth $150,000 plus attorney's fees? No, it's not worth it. But you're right. The biggest thing is making sure that you have the proper licenses or ownerships for whatever it is, images that you're wanting to sell. I've also seen it where individuals like us will be doing a podcast like this. They'll have no agreement between them, and all of a sudden the podcast host has taken all these episodes and they're packaging to sell it. Well, you and I never really had an agreement as to who owns the content for what we're talking about here. And so those muddy waters can also I could end up being like, you owe me this. And, it just becomes this whole big thing. So bottom line answer is, if you are wanting to use an image, make sure you have the proper licenses. There are so many websites out there that have these tiers of licenses. And guys, there's a reason for it. They're not just simply having a $25 one all the way up to a $4,000 one just because they feel like it.
Right.
Each of those licenses has certain permissions for a reason. And you kind of laugh, but I've had people go, well, I just take the cheapest one. And I say, well, the cheapest one didn't give you the permission. It's like asking your mom and dad when you want to go out to the skating rink on Friday night and you just say, we're just going to skate. Well, that's going to be an easy permission. But if you told them we're going to go to skate, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, and then we're going to go to Jimmy's house, we're going to do all this, they would have said no, right? So you have to look at the levels of the permissions and make sure you have the actual ones, because if you go do all this permission and go to Jimmy's house, you're going to get grounded when you only ask for level 1 permission.
Right. Okay, so actually about our podcast, on our podcast guest application, we do have that shows that, you agree for us to share this and that we have copyrights. What?
Yeah, I didn't know if you wanted me to highlight.
No, I love it. No, I totally love it. We do have that on ours, and we do have that protection on ours. I think it's something really important to say because, the learner and the student in me, now I want you to go back and look at mine and make sure it's good enough, even though I know you already went through that process anyway. I'm like, okay, shit, Rachel, I need to send this to you to make sure it's good. But mean, that's really, really an important thing too. Just another side note. So many people are getting into podcasting. So many people want to do this, and they miss that step as well, just to even have the permission to share and rebroadcast what we're talking about here today. And, you're sharing your intellectual property here with us on this show, and needing to make sure that, we have our shit together, basically our ducks in a row, so that we can continue to share that. So I'm really glad you shared that.
Well, and one thing that on that note with that also, so, I think it's fairly easy and a very straightforward concept for entrepreneurs to go, okay, I know I need an image. I just read the proper license. I check out on Unsplash. I'm good to go. The issue where a lot of issues come into play, and let's kind of switch to a logo, for example. They'll hop onto Fiverr, they'll hop onto Etsy, they'll hop on wherever, they'll have a friend from high school create a logo for you. They're not someone who's an employee of your business, okay? That's what's really important. What I'm moving into now is status of the person creating said intellectual property and who actually owns it. I see this all the time. Logo creators are one of the biggest ones, and this does tie us back around to trademarks and later on, but
just a quick question. Is this what I understand is called work made for hire? Is that the same thing, a contract? Or maybe it's totally confusing.
So that's the thing. Majority of times there's not even contracts when you're using this stuff. You may be having a contract terms with Fiverr, but you're not actually having anything with the person that's creating, or Etsy. And I'm just using these as an example because they're most commonly used ones. Basically, the fundamental thing that you guys need to consider here is if somebody creates something for your business and they are not a W-2 employee, they are not an employee by status, by default, they create the works, okay? So let's use the logo example. I go get a girlfriend I knew from high school. I ask her to create me a logo because I know she's trying to get her design business off the ground. We don't sign any contracts. She doesn't work for me on a consistent basis. I don't pay her on payroll. I just pay her by the job. By status, she's an independent contractor. By default, she owns all the rights in said logo. What does that mean for me? Okay? That means I only have a license. It means she can stop me from using my logo at any time. She could, if I continue using it, I could have to disgorge my profits for said use of the logo. I also cannot take it and trademark it later on. Let's use that same thing in a concept of an image. I have people that are shoot for me, photographers that do one-off jobs, independent contractors. Stick them on my Instagram, everything's great. But remember, photographers still all own the images unless they actually sign the rights over to me or they're an employee. And so what happens too, they're creating these killer brand images for me, everything's great. Maybe neither of us had a problem. Photographer and I are still happy with one another. But let's say a third party comes into play and they snag an image off my Instagram. I don't have the rights to said image. And that's a killer, like maybe very brand specific image of mine. I don't want it on someone else's Instagram feed. Let's follow the lines of ownership. Who owns the image here? Photographer. I only have a license. Third party is now unauthorized using. Who's the one that can enforce the rights? Not me. And it's my brand that's probably being, I hate to use the word infringe, but it's my brand that's being slighted on the internet or being diluted. It's incumbent upon the photographer. So I share all this to say you need to have the rights and the ownership signed over to you if you want to be able to enforce reproduction, you want to be able to trademark it later on, and you also want to keep yourself from having to be stopped from using the logo or the image. There's so many people that hire these, and I see it in groups, and my blood pressure is raising because we see issues come in the inbox all the time where it's this exact same situation. The relationship goes sour. You've built your brand on this logo you've had for 8 years, and all of a sudden the logo designer gets pissed off and decides to revoke your permissions. You're out. It's not your logo. It never was your logo.
Okay, so in order to get those original works signed over, is that a basic contract? Do you have those contracts where people can find those resources? So you guys can go to Rachel, of course, because she has all this taken care of for you. So you don't have to lose sleep tonight. Just go over to rachelbrenke.com and find all of these forms. So in a nutshell, in all of these steps and strategies. So in a nutshell, the first thing we talked about today was the difference between trademark and copyright. And that's really important. We dove into the importance of doing the simple basic steps and the importance of paying the minimal fee to protect the works, to protect the written works, to protect the content that is your individual original intellectual property, and going through that process of submitting that. And then we also talked about the dun dun dun, you don't own what you think you own. You don't have a right to what you think you have a right to. And just because free things are out there, like Unsplash, like Pexels, like these great places, just because free things are out there, well, shoot, it's not even free. It's not even just the free things. Even sites like 2020, which is one of my favorite stock photography sites, just because you pay to have a membership to 2020 doesn't then also mean... Right. And so making sure that you understand what you have a license to use versus what you own is what I'm hearing you say. Am I stating that correctly?
You're right. And you know what? From just a practical business perspective, I get, and I don't knock these subscription sites. I subscribe to a couple of them myself, but within the last few years, they become so popular. So many entrepreneurs are buying into them. I'm seeing the same images everywhere. I don't know your brand from the next brand. So I really do highly encourage, and this is something in my own business that I have really had to stretch myself, even with my photography background. I really encourage you to committing, because you can eliminate a lot of these problems by hiring your own people or learning to create your own stuff, and or hiring someone to do it or using the right documents. It just, especially when it comes to images or template creations, even if you're like ebook designs and all of that stuff. I mean, everything that's originally created, you want to make sure that you own it, so you have the rights to be able to resell it, the rights to use it. You don't want to have to be on the tail end of an infringement suit. So definitely, I think this is a lot of information. I probably gave you guys like a really high level overview that it takes us years to really dig into law school. So if you're like overwhelmed, don't freak out, pause, rewind. But now you know the distinctions between trademark and copyright. You know that if they're not an employee, they need to sign over the rights, So go through and do these steps again, and please feel free to reach out to me. I'm more than happy to talk about it. It's so important, because I've seen people lose their businesses because they can't, when I say their business, they've lost their brand that they were selling to other brands. There was a blogger, an influencer. She lost her brand because she couldn't afford to defend all of this. She was in the wrong, and she hadn't taken and done the 4 easy search steps that we talked about before.
Oh my gosh.
It breaks my heart. It really does.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're really grateful for people like you that are actually, as you were saying, in the trenches of entrepreneurship. It's not just an attorney that's set it outside this box. You're actually in this, doing this life for yourself while you're raising your family, while you're actively, pursuing your dreams and your sports. And that's the cool. You're just super cool, I think. Totally girl crushing right now.
Can I record that so my kids can hear it? That's so helpful to them.
Oh my gosh. Well, yeah, no, I totally will. I will make sure that, we share this across the board, and I'll tell my boys how rad you are. And overall, when we're thinking about starting a business, so many things, I think this is just one of the higher arching rainbows that I just want people to think about with this episode. And you just got to stop and ask questions. If you don't know what you don't know, that's okay. But then ask oh, okay, well, just because I'm unaware, what do I need to know here? I think people they get so busy, and we have so many different programs out there that are like, do this, launch your course and start your photography business and, create a Pinterest business. I don't even know, there's like everything under the sun, but it doesn't mean that person that's teaching you is an expert on legal things. Just like me, I'm the first one to say, when you join our programs to develop and launch your lifestyle business, I'm not giving you this stuff in that program because I'm not qualified. I'm not an attorney. It's all about this development of the services and the development of the programs and the development of the business model. It's not trademark protection and those things that come from an expert like you. So that's why I was super glad to have you on the show. And I literally, if people see behind the scenes, I have like pages and pages of Rachel notes that I've taken here that I think are so important. We're going to make sure all of the show notes from this podcast are in this episode number 92 of the Sweet Life podcast, so that you'll be able to find everything in here and how you can find Rachel, including this legal checklist you have for us as well. We're going to make sure there's a link to that. Tell us about the legal checklist, because I do think people might be slightly fearful and overwhelmed right now. So they can just remember this one thing to go get, and then you'll be okay.
Yeah, no, grab the legal checklist, whether you're new in business or you've been doing it for 30 years. It's not a one and done thing. I want you guys to run through it. You fill in the blanks, you check things off, get a sense of accomplishment, and then you go and you put a calendar reminder for 1 year from today, and you do it again, because as your business grows, your legal needs change. And I think one of the things, and this is really my intention with my legal niche sites and my podcast and everything, is, and I hate the word empowerment, but it's true. Like, I really want to empower you guys to be confident. I think one of the reasons people don't go to attorneys is they're worried it's going to cost a lot. They think they're scary and boring, which most of them are. They're not cool like me. So I hate to break that to you. But they don't know what questions to ask. They don't even know coming in the door the difference between trademark or copyright. And so get scary, get uncomfortable. That's my word for this year in athletics and in life. Get uncomfortable, because I'd rather you be uncomfortable walking in my door and us leaving as you and I as best friends, rather than really uncomfortable when we have to have the conversation about a $75,000 federal lawsuit bill. Like, that is a different level of uncomfortable. So take this checklist, run through it, make it a routine thing, and I encourage you to get to know local attorneys. Hopefully they're really well versed in business and intellectual property. You can reach out to me. I can try to guide you with some recommendations. I don't know all attorneys in all areas, but definitely they can be worth their weight in gold, even if you just once a year do a little legal audit. This checklist will be like a good first line, cover your bases with a little extra step of help. But it'll definitely help you to have a foundation to avoid these issues.
Perfect. Okay, and where can people find you? You do have a podcast and a lot of other places.
I do. Yep. So everything can be found at rachelbrenke.com. That's kind of the mothership website. It has my podcast, The Business Bites. They're 10, 15-minute quick episode for business entrepreneurs. I do talk a lot about legal and business strategy. And then from there, depending on what industry you guys are in, I know mostly lifestyle probably, but if you have friends, I have other legal niche sites that are also linked on there that you can shoot them over to. I would appreciate it.
I did see that. Yeah, you guys need to know, because a lot of our listeners and a lot of the Sweet Life Company clients are in the fitness and wellness niche. And so I saw that. So Rachel really has a rundown for you guys, fitness, and then there's photography as well. So, of course, general online business, and then fitness and photography too. So great. So thank you so much for being on the show. It was so informative. This was like one of the best, most
overwhelming.
No, I mean, I love it. Of course, I have like 1,000 things I want to talk to my team, my assistant about right now. And I'm just going to be like, okay, let's, make sure we're doing good in these places. And it's incredibly good. I mean, and it's important to say this. Like, I've owned my own companies for 16 years. I've been in business development for 21 years. And these things still scare the shit out of me that I'm not doing well enough, And so I want people to know that it is something that, pay attention to, and, you'll just constantly revisit. And even if you think, oh, I've been in business forever, I'm fine. That's like you're saying, that's not true. And so thank you for being honest. Thank you for being a totally rad mom who is pursuing her dreams in an amazing representation of what we consider the sweet life and just really going after it. I think that's amazing. And for calling it like it is. I think that is something that is not done enough. And there's a lot of sugar-coated things in this industry. And it's time that conversation changes. So thank you for being a big part of that.